Hey people, it's Nias Toki. Now I want to do another section on black heroes. Now this is a man called Dr. Booker Taliaferro Washington, who is the founder of the Tuskegee Institute, and this is from the Tuskegee University website. So he was born April 5th, 1856 in Franklin County, Virginia. Booker Taliaferro was the son of an unknown white man and Jane, an enslaved cook of James Burroughs, a small planter. Jane named her son Booker Taliaferro, but later dropped the second name. Booker gave himself the surname Washington when he first enrolled in school. Sometimes after Booker's birth, his mother was married to Washington Ferguson, a slave. A daughter, Amanda, was born to this marriage. James, Booker's younger half-brother, was adopted. Booker's elder brother, John, was also the son of a white man. Booker spent his first 9 years as a slave on the Burroughs farm. In 1865, his mother took her children to Malden, West Virginia to join her husband, who had gone there earlier and found work in the salt mines. At age 9, Booker was put to work packing salt. Between the ages of 10 and 12, he worked in a coal mine. He attended school while continuing to work in the mines. In 1871, he went to work as a houseboy for the wife of General Lewis Ruffner, owner of the mines. In 1872, at the age of 16, Booker T. Washington entered Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute in Virginia. The dominant personality at the school, which had opened in 1868 on the auspices of the American Missionary Association, was the principal, Samuel Chapman Armstrong, the son of American missionaries in Hawaii. Armstrong, who had commanded black troops in the Civil War, believed the progress of freedmen and their descendants depended on education of a special sort, which would be practical and utilitarian and would at the same time ill-calculate character and morality. Washington traveled most of the distance from Malden to Hampton on foot, arriving penniless. His entrance examination to Hampton was to clean a room. The teacher inspected his work with a spotless white handkerchief. Booker was admitted. He was given work as a janitor to pay the costs of his room and board, and Armstrong arranged for a white benefactor to pay his tuition. At Hampton, Washington studied academic subjects and agriculture, which included work in the fields and pigsties. He also learned lessons in personal cleanliness and good manners. His special interest was public speaking and debate. He was jubilant when he was chosen to speak at his commencement. The most important part of his experience at Hampton was his association with Armstrong, who he described in his autobiography as a great man, the noblest, rarest human being it has ever been my privilege to meet. From Armstrong, Washington derived much of his educational philosophy. After graduating from Hampton with honors in 1875, Washington returned to Malden to teach. For 8 months, he was a student at Wayland Seminary, an institute with a curriculum that was entirely academic. The experience reinforced his belief in an educational system that emphasized practical skills and self-help. In 1879, Washington returned to Hampton to teach in a program for American Indians, the Sioux, I remember. In 1880, a bill that included a yearly appropriation of $2,000 was passed by the Alabama State Legislature to establish a school for blacks in Macon County. This action was generated by two men, Lewis Adams, a former slave, and George W. Campbell, a former slave owner. On February 12, 1881, Governor Rufus Willis Cobb signed a bill into law establishing the Tuskegee Normal School for the training of black teachers. Armstrong was invited to recommend a white teacher as principal of the school. Instead, he suggested Washington, who was accepted. When Washington arrived at Tuskegee, he found that no land or buildings had been acquired for the projected school, nor was there any money for these purposes since the appropriation was for salaries only. Undaunted, Washington began selling the idea of the school, recruiting students and seeking support of local whites. Again, people say, well, why is he seeking the support of local whites? Again, this is post-Reconstruction American South. If you tried to set up a school and alienated the local white population, the school would not likely have taken off, and he may even have been killed if he got on their bad side. So obviously it made sense to keep on their good side and to keep them involved in the building of the school. All right. The school opened July 4th, 1881 in a shanty loaned by a black church, Butler AME Zion. With money borrowed from Hampton Institute's treasurer, Washington purchased an abandoned 100-acre plantation on the outskirts of Tuskegee. Students built a kiln, made bricks for buildings, and sold bricks to raise money. Within a few years, they built a classroom building, a dining hall, a girls' dormitory, and a chapel. By 1888, the 540-acre Tuskegee Normal Industrial Institute had an enrollment of more than 400 and offered training in such skilled trades as carpentry, cabinet making, printing, shoemaking, and tinsmithing. Boys also studied farming and dairying, while girls learned such domestic skills as cooking and sewing. Through their own labor, students supplied a large part of the needs of the school. In the academic department, Washington insisted that efforts be made to relate the subject matter to the actual experiences of the students. Strong emphasis was placed on personal hygiene, manners, and character building. Students followed a rigid schedule of study and work, arriving at 5 in the morning and retiring at 9:30 at night. Although Tuskegee was non-denomination, all students were required to attend chapel daily and a series of religious services on Sunday. Washington himself usually spoke to the students on Sunday evening. Olivia Davidson, a graduate of Hampton and Framingham State Normal in Massachusetts, became teacher and assistant pupil principal at Tuskegee in 1881. In 1885, Washington's older brother John, also a Hampton graduate, came to Tuskegee to direct the vocal training program. Other notable additions to the staff were acclaimed scientist Dr. George Washington Carver, who became director of the agricultural program in 1896, Emmett J. Scott, who became Washington's private secretary in 1897, and Monroe Nathan Work, who became head of the records and research department. On Tuskegee's 25th anniversary, Washington had transformed an idea into a 2,000-acre, 83-building campus that combined with such personal property as equipment, livestock, and stock in trade that was valued at $831,895. Tuskegee's endowment fund was $1,275,644, and training 37 industries was available for more than 1,500 students enrolled that year. Through progress at Tuskegee, Washington showed that an oppressed people could advance. His concept of practical education was a contribution to the general field of education. His writings, which include 40 books, were widely read and highly regarded. Among his works was an autobiography titled Up From Slavery, 1901, Character Building, My Larger Education, and The Man Farthest Down. Washington settled into the national scene on opening day of the Atlanta Exposition in 1895, when he spoke about the new Negro, one with knowledge of how to live, how to cultivate the soil, to husband their resources and make the most of their opportunities. Now, I want to expand upon this. Now, this actually made him quite celebrated amongst white America, because basically he was saying, look, we don't want to compete to integrate, in a sense, like to have the same access to things. We just want to live our lives separate. In the political, that in economic things, they'll just live their lives, they'll work, build their own businesses, and be separate. And for this, he was quite cheered, because basically he wasn't saying, let us end segregation, let's just have segregation which is equal for blacks and whites, the same access to the same things, if that makes sense. Anyway, it might be better to read Up From Slavery and read more about him to gain an understanding. But that speech in 1895 at the Atlanta Cotton Exchange, at the Atlanta Exposition, helped solidify his leadership, his role as the leader of the black community, which he held for the next 20 years until his death. Okay, going back on, eyebrows raised again on October 16th, 1901, when Washington became the first black person to dine at the White House. Counsel to many U.S. presidents, he was there at the invitation of President Theodore Roosevelt. Washington was married 3 times. In 1882, he married his Malden sweetheart, Fanny Norton Smith. She died 2 years later, leaving an infant daughter, Portia, who married William Sidney Pittman, an architect, in 1907. In 1885, Washington married Hampton graduate Olivia Davidson, then principal of Tuskegee, who died in 1889. 2 sons were born to this marriage, Booker Taliaferro Jr. and Ernest Davidson. Washington, in 1893, Washington married Fisk University graduate Margaret James Murray, who had come to Tuskegee as lady principal in 1889 and directed the programs for female students. Actually, he died on November 17th, 1915, and his funeral was attended by nearly 8,000 people. He was buried in the school that he built. Okay, now I want to first off address some criticism. People say that he was accepting white domination. I don't think he was. I think that he had the right idea. I think if his ideas were allowed to go to their fullest extent, black people would have just developed a separate society that would then develop into a separate nation. People like W.E. Du Bois wanted integration style progress, which is what we got with, say, Martin Luther King. Anyway, and also, as a side note, Booker T. Washington was very admired by Marcus Garvey. He liked his ideas of self-help, and he tried to have a meeting with Booker T. Washington, but unfortunately he died before that was able to happen. Anyway, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace, family.